The women on this stage are badasses in more ways than one. They have each had an enormous influence on changing their industries and are continuing to do so. And I think that I'd love to start with each of you telling me what your company has done to blow up the status quo. Start with you, Sara.
So I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Pandora. We started out as an internet radio company and are now a full music service. And really the original premise of the business was how did we disrupt radio and redefine that service for a connected world? How do we move it from being a one-to-many service to a one-to-one service?
When did Pandora start?
So it's actually been in place for 15 years now,
Wow.
but for 5 years it was a B2B service. They launched as a consumer service in 2005. And we have over 100 million listeners every 3 months, 80 million a month that listen to us for 24 hours a month. So we're the most mobile engaged service in the United States, greater than Facebook.
Heather, you were the general counsel at Gawker Media and are now running Gizmodo. You have had your share of interesting experiences, but start with the beginning before we get to the most recent chapter.
Sure. Gawker Media Group, which is now known as Gizmodo Media Group, which is and was called GMG, so I could use that more seamlessly, really started out to disrupt the media industry by changing the presentation of content. Instead of a one-way conversation between a journalist, or I'm sorry, a one-way sort of pathway between a journalist and a reader in the audience, Gawker really started opening journalism to be more conversational. It's really news as if your best friend is telling you about it. And that really started with the era of blogging. The first site was Gizmodo. And that then springboarded into a disruption of the business side. With that honest conversation as a basis, the company was then able to really blow out a commerce business. As you see, direct advertising on the decline in media nowadays. There's a lot of talk in digital media about, well, what's next? How do you make up for that? And the answer for us has been developing a commerce business where our audience has known us for telling it like it is. So if one of our writers who are really experts in their subject matter really dislikes something, you'll know it. And when they really like something, you'll know it and really believe it. And that has allowed us to develop a commerce business.
So when you say a commerce business, you're selling what?
Recommending products, digital products, books, all sorts of things. And a lot of digital media companies have tried this and have had very little success. I think we've had really a ton of success because it starts with the audience engagement and trust that we built up with our audience.
By being brutally honest.
Brutally honest.
Sophie.
Thank you for having me first. I'm the president of STX Entertainment, which is a global media company. We were incubated by TPG, which is obviously the American private equity giant, but also have some significant investment from China, Tencent, PCCW, Honey. But the thesis of the company was that in this environment, the artist, the major movie star, the major pop star, the major sports star, has a direct relationship with their audience, and they're trapped in a system, whether it's a traditional movie studio, a traditional record label, a traditional TV network, in which they're not actually enabled to have that direct relationship with the audience. So the thesis was, what if you were to build a home for these stars? What if you were to back their vision on every front, whether it's major movies, TV shows, reality shows, short-form content, in a non-siloed kind of zip line across fashion. So the first thing we built was a movie studio. We have a movie a month that we make, market, and distribute. So we spend about $1 billion a year making, marketing, and distributing movies. And the other 80% of our investment goes to every other platform out there.
So are you disrupting the movie business, or do you believe you're disrupting all businesses?
It's a brilliant question. I think for good reason, the traditional media companies are actually built to service not the artist, but Marvel or Pixar, the superhero, the $100, $200 million tentpole movie or the tentpole network that's actually not about the artist. It's about ancillary revenue.
So you're focusing on the artist rather than the product.
100%.
Okay. Now, you also have decided that this sort of mid-range kind of all-appealing type of movie is where the sweet spot is on this, right? Is that right?
I think on the movie...
Give some examples of some of these
that
movies.
thesis is true across every platform, which is my belief when I was building the company out. We first funded about 2.5 years ago. We just closed our Series C about 2-3 months ago. But the premise has always remained the same, which is if you take the artist and back their voice the way you want to see that voice. We made Bad Moms, for example, which is Mila Kunis in a kind of hard R comedy movie. That actually speaks directly to her audience. That was an $18.5 million movie that will gross about $200 million worldwide. We're built to service those films.
So you conceptualized, you took Mila Kunis and you said, who are her people? Now let's make a movie for her people.
Absolutely perfect.
Which is a completely backwards approach from
what's
the
her voice,
Okay.
who's her audience, and how do you make, market, and distribute content around that voice? That is exactly what we're doing across every platform, whether it's short-form content on social media sites, whether it's virtual reality content, if it's Stallone teaching you to box in VR, if it's Mila making you laugh in VR. That's the thesis of the company. How do you back the voice of an artist who, in a very, very noisy world, our belief is that voice actually cuts through the noise.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from all of you actually is that the disruption is coming from a deep personalization, right? I mean, and I think that's the world that we now live in. I want to go back to you, Sara, though. Pandora was so early on this music scene and sort of interacting between me, the listener, and what I chose. And now everybody does this. And in fact, you are sort of being disrupted yourself. So what's the next level and the next stage? How do you raise the game?
So at the outset, the innovation that Pandora created, and I think it's really interesting because it's thematic through all of these businesses, is that connection between the artist and the fan. And so we created technology called the Music Genome, where we literally listen to every single song that we put into our library. We rate it on 450 different facets. And then when somebody tells us the type of music that they love, we will go and find other artists for them that are like that and create that audience for those artists. And of the 150,000 artists that we have on Pandora, 80% of them have never been played on radio. So this was really a path for these artists to be able to create an audience and engage with that audience. And so that was really the basis of what the company had been doing for the first 7 or 8 years. I joined a couple of years ago as the Chief Strategy Officer, and I think it's notable as you look at businesses that are sustainable over time is they don't rest on their laurels. One of the things I say is there's no peacetime in the consumer internet. It's always wartime. Mm-hmm. And so we really, as a company, came together and said, what do we need to do to continue to grow? What will the evolution of the business look like? What platforms will we be thinking about delivering services via in the next 5 years? And foundationally, how do we take that personalization, that ability to ensure that every single song we put in front of a fan is from an artist that we believe they will love and they can build a relationship with.
So it's the technology, is it the technology superiority that's what you're
The technology-
selling at this point?
The technology superiority is what I would describe as the defensive moat. It is genuinely unique and it's extremely difficult to replicate. We have, as I said, 4 million songs we've done that analysis for now. Everybody who listens to that music that we put in front of them, they engages with it, they give us a thumb up or a thumb down, they skip it. We gather 1 billion data points a day on people's nuanced music preferences. So our ability to go beyond radio and start layering in new music services, leveraging your personal music graph is unparalleled. And so what you've seen us do over the course of the last 2 years, and we're in the middle of a fairly large wave of innovation as a company, is introduce these new services that understand as a listener what you love and then help you have a direct relationship with the artist.
So really quickly, because we're short on time, but like, what are some of the specific services that are different from Spotify, from Apple, from everybody else?
So there's a couple of key things. We built out an entire platform for music makers, so this is content creators, to talk directly to their fans on the service. So literally within the context of the app, they're able to create what I describe as like a verbal tweet that we seamlessly weave into the listening experience that has calls to action for the artist. That can be buy tickets to my tour, watch content
So
online.
similar to Sophie, you're actually linking with the artist, which is really interesting.
Very, very strong. And that's why it's interesting hearing that thematic trend. It's like we are there to facilitate that connection and ensure that that is a direct relationship.
And it's also, you're creating companies, all of you, that are getting rid of the middleman, although in a way you're the new middleman, in a sense. I mean, Heather, I have to ask you, having gone through, and if anybody has been living under a rock, Gawker was sued by Hulk Hogan. Peter Thiel funded the case, and the end result was the shuttering of Gawker. I was saying in the green room that this was an unbelievable, truly unbelievable parallel to what has happened in the world since then, and how the First Amendment is now being, shall we say, challenged by the incoming administration. So I just have to ask you to talk about that experience. You disrupted everyone else by bringing the comments and the sharing and the conversation, as you said, together. And then it kind of backfired. What was that like, and what lessons are there for the rest of us?
It was an extraordinary experience and a wild ride. I've been at the company for just under 4 years, but really the last 2 years were focused on this very large litigation that was getting larger and backed by a billionaire with a significant grudge against the company. It had the negative effect of eventually forcing us to shutter Gawker. I think some positive effects in the world. I think it put this issue really to the forefront before Trump ever did, that the First Amendment is strong in this country, but can come under assault by really powerful people who don't like the reporting on them. Gawker was one of the companies that pointed out that this particular billionaire is supposed to have the golden touch, but maybe there's what we call story behind that story. Maybe there's more to this person who has incredible influence on a lot of people's lives. And so that's the lesson in it. As far as the experience itself, it was an incredible management experience. I had to stand in front of the entire company one day and say, in 10 minutes, we're going to put this company into bankruptcy. And I'm asking all of you to work harder than you've ever worked before. Not to flee and not to panic. And I had hundreds of terrified faces staring back at me. And the company hires people that fit with the overall company ethos, that are open and not afraid to speak up. And so when we hold a normal company meeting, there are hands going up all over the place. It's not like a more typical company meeting where people are quiet or there are canned questions, read off of a sheet. And I got silence back. And
Wow.
So I had to figure out, okay, I need these people to stay on because we are nothing without our people, and we need to sell this company and find a home for all of the good journalism that all the other sites do. So I just started a dialogue, which is really what the sites are about, and I stood up there for 2 hours, and I asked myself the first question. I said, okay, if you guys are quiet, I'm going to think about what might be on your minds right now, and so I just came up with the first question and then another question, and then hands started going up. And 2 hours later, we had people smiling and laughing and getting straight back to work. And after that moment, our traffic went up, revenue minus the legal expenses went up. But people really did it, and they trusted when I said, if you do this, I will find a home for this company, and we saved every job. But it was an extraordinary amount of work, really, for everyone.
But then Gawker was shut by the buyer.
Gawker was shuttered by the buyer, which wasn't a surprise. Once you have a huge $140 million judgment, it's seen as a very high-risk property, no matter how strong the defendant's side of the case is.
I want to have time for a couple of questions because we're really running short. But really quickly, Sophie, I just want to ask you, How do people react to STX now? When you call, I mean, you're very young, you grew up in the business, your mom worked in music, right? Do people freak out?
On me personally, or
No,
about the company?
in other words, are you generating
Very
fear
big distinction.
yet?
We're not built to be the brand, the consumer-facing brand. I think with the very rare exception of Disney, in which people will truly spend $16 on a ticket to see a Disney movie, I'm very happy for STX to stay in the background as a brand name, because it's about empowering and weaponizing and actually protecting the artist and the voice of the artist. So the reception to that from, and perhaps the slight difference between us is that we're very targeted in terms of who we actually sit and work with. These are globally branded, globally recognized stars who have a very idiosyncratic voice in the marketplace. They are the person who has a relationship with the consumer. So from my perspective, the dream is when a star realizes, no, I can walk in the doors of STX, get my content made on any and every platform, you have the money to pay for it, you can market it, you can distribute it, you have the best teams in the world making that content. That's kind of the dream come true.
Okay.
That's the best situation I could possibly be in.
Great. We have time for one question. And do we have no questions? Okay, I will carry on then. What would you say to people who are looking to disrupt you? Each of you.
If I'll step in, I don't think we're poised to be competitive to any of the traditional media companies. We're actually filling a vacuum, which is that a traditional major movie studio is not built to make, market, and distribute a $20 million movie. As a result of incredible success and a huge legacy of deals for 50 years, you're actually built to make Iron Man. So I think by taking that audience relationship and backing that, it puts you in an interesting position. The worst case scenario for me is that there is actually someone out there gunning for you. The toss-up between a Spotify and an Apple and a Pandora, how do you win in that mix? I don't know. I think we've always tried to pivot so that we're not directly competitive with anyone, but take advantage of a vacuum out there.
Right.
I would say think long and hard about really putting your money where your mouth is, supporting these kinds of journalistic principles, that it is, every story is really worth it. You can't look at each individual story and say, well, was that one really worth it? You need to look at it holistically and really believe in getting true information that people care about out. And some of the best stories are some of the difficult ones. If in the summer, Jezebel is one of our sites, a woman's interest site, published an interview with a woman who had an abortion at 32 weeks. And it was a really difficult interview, really powerful, got a huge response, and then was re-socialed and had another huge response in the middle of the debate where Trump was the third debate. You know what I'm talking about. I won't repeat it. That kind of journalism is tough to support sometimes. And I would say it's harder than you think.
But there is an opportunity now.
But there's an
Is there?
opportunity.
I mean,
Absolutely.
is there an opportunity now, or should people give up because your
Oh, no.
example?
I would say please come on board and
Yeah.
compete because we need it more than ever right now.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Really quick,
So
Sarah.
I would say competition makes us all stronger. Ultimately, we have a very unique value proposition, which is about how do we help any musician who wants to find an audience do that on Pandora, and how do we use the personalization we have to do that. And frankly, we are able to remain in front of the market by virtue of the fact that we do that better than anybody else. But, I think the paranoid are the ones that survive. So I think it's good for you to feel like that every day.
Okay, well, more paranoia to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.